Apologize for the delay. I'm Joel Roberts. I'm formerly of KBC Talk Radio in Los Angeles. I am a communications consultant to OAC, and this is a whole series called Continuing Construction Through a Pandemic, which has certainly thrown a lot of curveballs at all of us. But here to navigate this, well, terrain that nobody predicted are two great experts. Number one, Alex Hofto, who is a senior director at OAC. He's been in the industry for over 19 years, worked on huge projects involving, among others, Microsoft, big hotel chains, has experience with project management, construction management, mega programs, etc. Also joining us, Steve Murakami, great background as well too, 20 years in the industry. He's an education expert, has focused primarily on K through 12 schools, their design, their construction. I believe, Steve, you are an architect by training, is that correct?
Yep, the first 16 years of my life, that was my professional life, designing schools.
And you have actually been an architect on some 20 to 22 projects in 18 districts, totaling, if I recall correctly, about $155 million worth of construction. That's an impressive credential. And Steve has also been part of developing a software program that's going to help all of you navigate site safety. We'll be hearing a little bit more about that. Before we get into the meat of the matter, I do want to do a couple of quick housekeeping items. Number one, we are recording this webinar and you will have access to it tomorrow. And number two, you will notice that there are ways that there's a way that you can type in, you can chat and submit a question to us. We're live, as you can tell. Feel free to do that. Any questions that we're not able to get to today, the contact information for Steve and Alex will be provided, and you will be able to write to and hear directly from them. Okay, guys, I have a very basic question. We'll begin with you, Steve.
All right.
Is construction continuing at all?
Oh, for sure, for sure. This has definitely been a confusing time navigating this new pandemic COVID landscape. It seems like for the first 2 or 3 weeks, everybody was trying to figure out what this meant for them and whether or not, at least in Washington, you were deemed essential. There are a lot of projects and work sites still moving forward. Fortunately, K-12, the sector I'm in, was deemed essential, and so we're full speed ahead. But with a different tuned radar. I think I would safely say that it's not business as usual. We're taking slightly different approaches to things.
It's not all cylinders, is it?
No, it's a little slow to start, but we have some projects, at least for Lake Washington School District, that are on the downward glide path to September and are looking good. So we're just trying to maintain momentum right now.
And Alex, from your perspective, are things continuing? Are they continuing apace?
Well, I have work on 2 projects right now. One was stopped in San Francisco with the London Breed order to shelter in place back in mid-March. And so we were the first of it to experience that. And then I have a project in Dallas where we're continuing to work. So all the employees that we would be doing a remodel around are actually at home, and the construction workers are essential. So we are actually implementing on-site safety measures, but we continue to make work and actually picking up some time in a few activities that we're going to be finishing late.
I definitely want to talk about those on-site safety measures in a moment. And today we're talking about site access, which is a little bit different from site safety, and we'll get into that distinction in a moment. But one thing I want to know is this word essential that both of you guys have used. No pun intended, but it seems to be that's the most essential word of the moment. Who designates what is essential? Is this done county by county, state by state, federally? Steve, have at it.
Well, for Washington, it came from a governor's directive 2025 and several following guidance memos. And for us in the K-12 world, there were some interpretations from our state superintendent of public instruction that made it absolutely clear that K-12 construction and everything that it supports is essential. Mm-hmm. And so there is a lot of documentation available now and processes in place to allow you to seek an essential status if you weren't initially.
Alex, what about on your end?
So at first, when they did the shutdown in San Francisco, we were able to read between the lines, and hotels were considered housing, so it was an essential project. The city saw what some people were doing and amended that and said hotels are not essential, so we got stopped. And so we're currently in pause there right now. Now, again, San Francisco is very prescriptive in what they said was essential in product type. Down in Dallas County and even Los Angeles County, it's more general and vague. And so a lot of projects have continued to proceed in both counties, Los Angeles and Dallas.
So I guess what I'm hearing from you both is that construction does continue in some ways in certain places.
Yeah.
But not everywhere and not as it did before.
Correct.
So this is new terrain to navigate. How can people like you guys at OAC help clients function in this somewhat, 3 out of 4 cylinder environment? Alex.
So in Dallas, we have our whole project team has been very proactive. And so when the COVID-19 shelter-in-place orders were put in place, our general contractor hired a third-party firm who set up a tent on site, and our general contractor modified the means of coming in and out of the site. And all workers entering the building had to get their temperature checked, had to answer a few questions, and then they would get a sticker put on their hard hat or vest. And really just sort of think of that as another piece of...
Forgive the interruption, but
Yep.
What you're describing now, is that what is meant by site access?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we changed site access into the property.
Who can literally walk onto a site and who can't,
Yeah.
whether the site is up and running or not. Is this what we mean? I know it relates to site safety, but give me a little bit of the distinction there too.
So before, if you could come into the parking lot in a couple designated areas and walk into a couple ways into the site, now that's totally changed, and there's only one way in. And then when you park in this part of the parking lot, everyone will know that you have gone through the test. So in addition to your sticker, you're only parked one spot, and so you can tell those who inadvertently missed the test, right? Or they're not up to the current work plan.
Would they be on the site at all?
Yeah, but sometimes there could be a delivery that you're not anticipating, that's someone who's maybe out working for the landlord, right? And not even part of the projects, but still the whole team is educated in a way that they go, hey, that person,
Right.
Which is good. It helps to safety and educating the team.
And Stephen, the environments that you're working in, what really is meant by site access?
Site access for us starts with that is deemed entitlement of being essential. And so the measures that Alex talked about are one way of really controlling to ensure that the contractors are all following the guidelines and best practices, and that we're to do our best, our due diligence to make sure that people stay safe on site as best as we can, so that we are allowed to continue. Because I think if we can't demonstrate that we can operate within the guidelines, I think projects will get shut down. And so, you asked about running on all cylinders and what does the construction world look like right now. And I would say one of the great things about our industry is it's very cyclical in nature, in that oftentimes you spend half a year or a year in design and managing teams, and then you get out into the field and you start building. And so we're still managing a ton of projects that are in design, and we have engineers and architects working from home remotely together. Even for Lake Washington School District, on a 30-person facility advisory committee that's a public group. And so we're managing that all through Zoom with breakout rooms, and we're maintaining this process of getting community input to help drive and shape the next bond for that school district. We also are having projects that are about to transition and go into construction. And so we've developed a lot of guidelines for virtual online bidding. And so we've had maybe a half a dozen bid openings in the last few weeks that we've done completely remotely. We have set up really controlled site access walks so contractors can see existing conditions, and then virtually host public bid openings, which is new to me. In the 23 years I've been doing this, I've never had a virtual bid submission, but
I mean, it really raises the question, which actually I'd like to set aside for the moment, but definitely come back to. Given all these changes, when we finally return to normal, it's not going to be the same normal, is it?
No. No, you know,
It's really not. But by the way, we've already got a great question that came in with regard to something that Alex mentioned before. Katie Trimpey, thank you so much for writing this in. Alex, when somebody gets a sticker, do they need to get a new sticker every day? Brilliant question in my humble view.
Yeah, and it's a new sticker every day that's chosen by the superintendent of the project. So, but every day, so everyone knows what that is. And then if they come out, if you can tell if someone's not gotten the test that day.
Right. So
And there's been incidents where people see they don't have the right sticker, and there's self-policing that's happening.
awesome. So there's a way to prevent counterfeiting stickers or
Yeah.
faking them or whatever. That's great. Okay. Beyond the safety precautions that are normally taken in normal times on any construction site, what are the changes that you have seen, Alex, with COVID-19? You're working on a couple of projects that you mentioned. Give us a little bit more about what you've seen.
So the one in San Francisco, we're getting ready to ramp back up, and the big thing there is our footprint is so small for a 13-story high-rise. So they're really trying to game plan how they're going to work once the walls are up, right? It's one thing we are pouring a deck and they can somewhat sequence it, but as the walls are starting to go up, they're really strategizing what that looks like from a flow through the project, right? We talked about the one entrance into the parking lot in Dallas, and they're trying to think of that way on a hotel floor. So we're in the process of solving that problem right now. In Dallas, it really is come to everyone's got face masks on, which is just one more piece, but that's fine. The stickers we talked about, and now when break time, everyone has to go back to their truck or stand away from one another for coffee and lunch, and but everyone's used to that. That's fine. I would also, one other thing too is, usually there's a shared water cooler. Those are gone. So now it's individual bottles of water, or people are bringing their own water. And, but a lot of people are doing they're doing it on their own too. No one takes it as a hindrance.
So social distancing is not only during the work, it's during what would be socializing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Steve, to help people navigate all this, you, and I believe a partner at OAC, if I'm not mistaken, have written some software. And do you have a name for the software? Site safety software? What's the name of it?
Yeah, we're calling it a site safety tracker. And so this is a really cool, I think a pretty innovative solution that came from working with one of our contractors in the Lake Washington School District, Lydig Construction, who always seems to be ahead of the game with technology and tools. They developed a cloud-based scan code that you would look at, like a QR code at each site entry, and so that they could check each employee and have them self-certify that they are feeling healthy and that they're safe to be on site. And so they presented that to the district, and I instantly saw, along with a few others, that there's a great opportunity to launch this across the district because, a school district like Lake Washington or any district has so many facilities and so many vendor, partner, contractors, and we're really looking at this school closure, the extended closure, as an opportunity to get all of that summer work that we rushed to get in that 2 months started earlier, and keep the economy going and keep people working, but we have to do it safely. And so,
do you envision that this software will be usable not only in this district or in these schools, but in fact, other districts and even other industries?
Oh, for sure. It's completely adaptable in the way it's written. We could give it to anybody. We can host it. We can put your logos in. We can put your questions in. And when I get into the details, you can kind of understand how it could fit for you. But it could be for a client with one project. It could be for a contractor. It could be for an owner that has multiple sites and just needs to track and understand who's coming into their buildings.
So what kinds of questions are you asking in the software that people need to answer in order to get access?
That's a good question. We're asking them if they've experienced COVID symptoms, if they've been diagnosed with COVID, or anybody in their household has been diagnosed with COVID. We can tailor it to basically whatever local jurisdictions or state guidelines, best practices. So we followed some CDC recommendations and guidelines from the state. We ask, are you able to do your work and maintain safe distance, the social and physical distancing? And so we basically asked them a few questions. They would come up to the gates or the entry of the school, scan the QR code or hit the URL. They would log in their name and their email address, which the system remembers, so you only do it once. And then you just, if you can answer no to the few questions about, are you symptom free? Are you experiencing symptoms? Are you experiencing any of these issues? If you can say no, it welcomes you into the site. It gives you some guidelines for, wash your hands often, maintain the required social distancing, and then it puts you in a database as being logged into that specific site on that day.
Mm-hmm.
If you say,
you mind if I throw a few curveballs at you?
Sure, go for it.
Well, suppose somebody has a temperature,
Yeah,
but they're asymptomatic. They don't, or that's the only symptom they have. Or suppose somebody has been exposed to someone else who has had symptoms, but they themselves do not have symptoms. And I'm actually leaving aside the grand question of, I guess we're assuming that people are going to answer these questions honestly.
Yep. Well, so a couple things. It's an honor system, and we're expecting them to self-certify and be held accountable. But then, like what Alex was saying, there's a different air about these being on site and being around facilities. And I think people are more willing to call each other out and hold each other accountable. So if you're walking around and you're coughing or you're sneezing, a lot of people have that. I mean, you see it in the grocery stores. You see it everywhere you go now. If somebody coughs on the sidewalk, you instantly jump to that conclusion. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're just in a different era. And I think people are going to hold themselves accountable in different ways. And I think people will be more honest if they are experiencing symptoms that this is a big deal and they need to quarantine if they're feeling, because you just don't know.
I'm just thinking out loud here, and Alex, I've got a question for you in a moment, but out loud, I'm thinking this might help employers with liability issues if at least the people who are working on the site have been asked these questions. And then if perchance they didn't tell the truth, at least there might be some kind of, I don't know, legal protection. I'm reaching a little bit, but I'll bet that's something that comes to people's minds.
Yeah, it could. I mean, there's the way OSHA is handling this, at least in Washington, is that depending on what kind of business sector you're in, it could be a recordable incident that if a construction site is a workspace, if you contract COVID-19 because you're doing your activities normally associated with your workplace, it could be a reportable incident based on how your business is classified. And I'm not going to speak to the technical side of that, but there is that. But more importantly, I think the tool, what our intent was, is if somebody does, like a school, let's say example of a school, we have teachers coming and going all the time in Windows so that they can get access to their materials to leverage that for their extended learning. And so you've got teachers coming and going. We even opened up schools so students can come in and get their belongings that were left behind. So you've got a ton of people coming back and forth.
Right.
And we've had a number of schools where it says, hey, this teacher tested positive for COVID-19. And so then we have to go back and backtrack and try and figure out who was in there, where were they?
Right.
And so this tool, every time you log in, it creates an entry in the database, located and tagged to a site that we can pull up after the fact and see who all was there and at least notify them that they were potentially in an environment.
It's a great point because, who your circle of contacts has been. I mean, it's really, really critical in this environment. Alex, could you see the application of software like this on the sites that you're working at?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's definitely beneficial, especially if you work for a tech company where I think they could be even probably working on their own solutions. The one thing that I'd like to just bring up too is just construction industry as a whole. It's in like mining, other people that are working with their hands and out in the field is really set up, has always had detailed written out site safety protocol and measures, and everyone's used to that. So as opposed to an office worker who just shows up in an office building, I think construction industry is really set up to add one more layer of precaution and safety for their employees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what makes the system so beautiful, is that you can launch it and have those people that aren't used to being on construction sites, our vendors that are working on telephone lines, right, or even roofers up on the, you can check any single person that's coming in to support a facility and ask them if they're feeling well and able to be on site, and then record that. And
But
then if you,
by the way, Steve, who does the asking? Who monitors this?
well, that's a good point. So right now, for the current example I'm talking about, we have project managers that are working with all these vendors and contractors. And so we're being really proactive about scheduling their site visits and knowing when they're going, but we don't know exactly who's showing up and what condition they're showing up in. And so this is that opportunity to really make sure people are saying that they're feeling healthy and the facility is safe for them to go into.
And is there a new job description that's going to come out of this market? I'm a person that comes in from outside the normal group and monitors these things objectively. Is that going to happen?
There could be. We are seeing safety officers being added all over the place on construction sites to monitor social distancing, to check in with employees, to make sure that the team members are healthy. So yeah, there's definitely a potential of adding that kind of level of review.
And the documentation you talked about, I assume it's updated, what, daily?
Oh yeah, no, it's a live database. So every time you go to a site, you can log it in. We've even designed it so it can be expanded. And so if you were interested in understanding exactly where every single person goes,
right,
we could do a QR code on every single door. Wow. So that it's tagged to this building, to this room, and you could actually have the people just continue scanning through and you'd understand exactly where they were that day. Awesome. We're also looking at technology that can be leveraged that just tracks cell phone location. And so that through the signal, you can follow it and you can understand the path they walk through. Because when you clean a 200,000 square foot building, because that teacher that had COVID-19 came through, right, but only went to her classroom or his classroom, where do you clean when the next one reports? Do you have to shut down the facility and go through the entire thing again? Because you just don't know exactly where they were.
Right, right. But speaking of where they work, what if they're working from home? What have the two of you found with regard to working off-site, virtually? I mean, obviously you can't, hammer a nail virtually, but there are a lot of things that can be done remotely. What are the other adaptations that you're seeing, whether it's staggering shifts, whether it's keeping a certain distance between people? So I want to hear a little bit more about productivity while working from home, but also productivity overall. Alex, if you could take a stab at this.
So out in the field, there's definitely a limited amount of, you're essentially, if you're a project engineer or project manager and you don't need to be there, they're definitely not going to site every day. They're working remotely. Now there's times they're still going to site, but just not the frequency of it. So for our life, I think we have a lot more Zoom meetings than normal and other face-to-face. Everyone's sort of getting used to it. From the field itself, it's nice when you can look across the room and ask your engineer for an answer as opposed to sending an email. So there's definitely probably a lot more phone calls and video calls.
The contractors have to adapt their safety plans.
Yeah, the safety plans, I mean, that's part of the CDC response. I mean, everyone has to do their COVID-19 safety protocol.
And speaking of the CDC, in terms of sanitization, how is this being done? Where is it needed? Where is it not? Cost, benefits. I want to hear an analysis of that. Steve, you want to take a stab at that?
I don't know about that one. That's a tough one because we're having conversations all the time about how do you clean and access or a construction site to wipe down. I mean, there's a lot of things I see happening where, I've seen construction sites where there's an attendant at every bathroom, bank of bathrooms, and they're wiping down and sanitizing between use, which has been great. But we've also had those conversations of what do you do when people, carpenters working on their knees, sliding across the floor. There's a lot of different places you can work and a lot of things that you can't necessarily clean. And so cleaning the PPE, wrap, the hands and the face protection, and best practices has been the thing I've seen that works the best. I've seen school districts take pretty stringent approaches to saturating surfaces with spray and cleanser and really trying to obliterate the virus that way. And it takes a lot of effort and a lot of material.
Alex, are you seeing similar things?
Yeah, well, we in Dallas, the project's under construction, they're using the existing facilities. And so the landlord has just increased the frequency and the degree at which they're cleaning the restrooms. And that vendor who's hired underneath my landlord, they're coming in full protection, and they're just doing extra level themselves.
Mhm. You know, looking at this from another perspective, we've been aware of a project that's happening in Silicon Valley recently. And as the two of you may already know, Silicon Valley has a sort of a compounded situation of problems. Number one, labor costs are going up. They're very high there. I don't need to tell you that. And number two, they may be encountering labor shortages, which could become even more acute once things flatten out and there's kind of a feeding frenzy back. What do you guys have to offer about dealing with those situations? Alex.
I would say, I'll jump in first.
Go ahead, Steve. Yeah.
I would think that we've seen it happen in a number of different ways. I just lost my train of thought jumping in front of Alex. So Alex, if you want to go, sorry.
Yeah, so there's definitely our GC, they've cut down on staff for sure. They've looked at that, and there's definitely, the economy has been booming for a very long time, especially in construction. So there's definitely been some furloughs, some terminations, and keeping key personnel and keeping everyone lined up, right? So we've been focusing on procurement to make sure, even though we're not on construction, that where is everything currently at in state of fabrication, and that's been our primary focus. We're under contract, so we still have those forces that are supposed to hang the building or hang the exterior skin and place the decks. We haven't been warned of any labor shortages at this time.
So I remember what I was going to say. Sorry, Joel. But we have had subcontractors that, there was so much confusion going on for the first 4 weeks of this, that some contractors packed up because they didn't know exactly how they were going to operate and maintain and whether or not they were essential.
Right.
We have seen teams where members, when you have a crew of 5 or 6 and you lose 1 or 2 people because they're having symptoms, but tests aren't available, so they're not confirmed, but they're still quarantining. Yeah. We've seen some of that. But we've seen some real benefits in contractors, Cornerstone and Leidig, thinking really creatively about how to split shift. We're trying to get a lot of finishes in like Juanita High School, for example. So the concrete floor finisher voluntarily decided to work late nights and weekends, because that way no workers are around and he has free unobstructed areas. Right. And we're allowed to span out and separate and distance ourselves. And so there have been some creative situations.
It sounds like there is probably a net loss of productivity going on. Mm-hmm. But the name of the game is adaptation and agility. Am I right?
Yeah, for sure.
Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the nature of construction is problem solvers, right? So this is one more problem, but there's definitely a group of people whose mindset is, how do we overcome this challenge and to meet our end goal?
Scheduling, costs, what are you guys seeing there?
So in Dallas, we haven't seen any increased costs besides the third-party testing, but that seems like a very drop in the bucket to keep the project on time, and so we just have been doing our check-ins on procurement. In San Francisco, there's definitely, when we're not doing any work, there's some time and costs associated with that, and we're in the process of negotiating that. But that client is also in Seattle and is renegotiating a project they're getting ready to start, and and seeing, and some people are willing to do that, and they've been successful.
Yeah, and what we're seeing. Oh, sorry. What we're seeing, we see some expenses coming just from infrastructure to support safety, extra hand washing stations, extra bathrooms, extra break areas being set up so we can keep separate. And so those costs are pretty minimal. We are, like I said before, seeing safety officers being added to job sites. And so those are some real costs that will hit projects. We have some of our contractors forecasting 10 to 30% loss in productivity. And so we're challenging that. I mean, it seems rational and reasonable to say, yeah, you are going to lose some time at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, with the extra PP&E, maybe walking an extra path and going around a congested area. There might be some of those that warrant a loss of productivity. One of the tools that we're working with, that again, working with Lydig, they created a tool that basically has a bunch of different levers that we're sliding levers to extend, how long does the shelter in place directive stay? What does that do times the loss of productivity when you're starting to talk about that finish line that you have to hit?
Yeah.
And so we're looking real time and trying to understand how much work's remaining, how much time do we have left to do it, and what are the barriers that are impacting us along the way. And as the directives get extended out, we can at least have a simple model that we can start looking at forecasts and projections.
You just used the word that I want to harp on, if I may. Forecasting. We've got about 3-4 minutes left in our conversation here. Let's talk about the new normal. I would really like to hear from the both of you, because for those of you that don't know Steve Murakami, for example, Steve, you have been involved in the design of classrooms that most people would think are kind of revolutionary and innovative. I mean, am I correct in that characterization? They're a little bit atypical.
Yeah. I've been fortunate to be involved in some great projects that challenge it.
So some people might have said, well, gosh, that's not a normal classroom the way I'm used to it. Normal classroom, you got rooms 1 through 6. You've designed classrooms where the walls can be removed, where all kinds of multi-teacher collaboration can take place and all this kind of stuff. So you have been part, both of you really, of revolutionizing what is considered to be normal. As you look at the adaptations to the COVID-19 pandemic that we're in now, how many of them do you think will permanently alter normal?
I'll start with that. There's been thinking in our area in the K-12 world for the last decade or so of trying to push computers out 1-to-1 for middle school and high school. There's been some hesitation to push it down earlier to the elementary school aged kids. But I think what this has shown us is how agile our young kids are and how adaptable they are. So I've got a 10-year-old that's in school 3 hours a day, working in OneNote and Microsoft Teams, and is virtually connected to her teacher and her peers. And so I think that as we start thinking about connectivity and the way kids learn, there's been some early adopters that have flipped classrooms where they're working on the hands-on practical stuff during the day, and kids are watching YouTube videos and lectures at night, and that's the homework, where you don't have to try and understand and work it out yourself. You get to just absorb, and then the next day in class you get to actually do the hands-on practical. I'd love to see initiatives like that, where classroom time, when you're physically there, becomes more about the solution and problem solving and working together.
Yeah.
And that you rely on and lean into that technology to do just a direct instruction. And it could change the square footage layouts. It could change the type and number of spaces, but I think teachers are quickly being forced to learn a new modality of reaching kids digitally. That's fantastic. I think that's going to benefit them.
Yeah, no dispute from my point of view. And kind of panning back from the educational environment, Alex, how do you think construction, when the curve flattens out and things can theoretically go back to normal, how do you think construction will have been permanently changed?
I think we always did this anyways, but the level of understanding where your materials are coming from all over the world is just going to be even more scrutinized. And that goes for certain parts of the United States. I know we got a couple furniture manufacturers right now and on the East Coast that are shut down. Now their plants shut down because of the shelter-in-place order, and they're not considered essential workers. So until there's a long-term permanent solution, I think you're really just going to have to spend a tremendous amount of time focusing on where your stuff is coming from and understand where what county your project's being built in. Because I think there could be a situation where, again, before any sort of vaccine or long-term solution, certain counties could be put in shelter-in-place orders. So you're understanding where you're at there. Again, I think product types and the constraints of your site will limit productivity. So I think people are going to have be a little more conservative on the duration of a schedule with these new protocol in place. I mean, they're going to learn real time what productivity really does. And then going forward, I think they're definitely going to scrutinize that much more. The old models that they were looking at, I think they'll be updated and adjusted.
And I think the universal imperative to have a plan B for freaking everything.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's supply chain, whether it's scheduling, whether it's cost, adaptability and agility, it seems to me, are the name of the game right now. Guys, we are pretty much out of time. I want to absolutely thank you both for being with us. I want to remind the audience that you will be able to get a recording of this, and that will be available tomorrow. Alex and Steve will be able to answer your questions. So any of the questions that we didn't get to, they will answer. Their contact information will be made available to people. We really appreciate your being with us here. By the way, next time we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about site safety, which, as we learned today, is a little bit different from site access. Joining us at that time will be Derek Ray, another one of the, I believe, principals at OAC, and he is in the life science and healthcare area with a strong contractor background. This is a guy who really knows how to work under serious pressure. Also, Dave Jobs will be with us, who I believe, in addition to everything else, is like the son of the original founder of OAC or something like that. But when King County reached out to OAC recently, Dave Jobs became very involved with that. He previously has been involved with courthouses, with juvenile correction facilities, etc. Now here he is working with field hospitals, with quarantines. This guy has a lot of experience. It really shows you that OAC is ongoing adaptability commitment, if I may make the play on letters myself. The next show will be next Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. Again, next Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. I want to thank Alex Hofto and Steve Murakami again for being with us. Thank you all for tuning in. Take care until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.